All right, everybody, it's July 30th. This is the Konflux Community Architecture Call. Francesco, you're up first. Take it away.
Yes, thank you, Ralph. Hi, everyone. I'm Francesco from the Konflux Workspaces team. As you may know, we are deploying in staging and production, and as part of this, we are also installing our CRDs. Actually, we used as a placeholder the domain konflux.io when we started developing the project, and we noticed now that most of the CRDs in Konflux are using the appstudio.redhat.com domain. So I'd like to ask if we need to rename from konflux.io to the appstudio.redhat.com. And given that AppStudio seems a quite old name, I wanted to ask if there is any plan about moving away from it. And in this case, if we can anticipate that by using already the new domain, if there is any plan. So that's what I wanted to ask for everyone here.
Yeah, I'm curious for others' thoughts on this, but I guess my take is that we should rename. I wish we could rename. It's just expensive and hard to do so because everybody's referring to the particular namespace of your old custom resources. If you're not in a situation yet where your CRDs are used yet, I would suggest for the namespace using confluxci.dev if that works in the string, because then it just will align with our human readable website to make things line up.
Okay, so we can use this one, konflux.ci.dev.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. I guess if anybody's making a new custom resource, use that for the group. And for anybody, I guess I have the same question maybe you do. Is anybody thinking about renaming the group for their resources? I guess I haven't heard anybody ask trying to like coordinate a migration to that. It would be nice to move ahead, but again, I just know it's difficult. No. Okay. Well, I think we should do with this, I think, is we should draft an ADR, a short ADR explaining the situation, right? That it is as expensive as we think it is. All new CRDs should be in this group. Old CRDs are acceptable, but when you get an opportunity, if you're doing some other refactoring and there's a good time, please move to the new group.
Okay, I've taken notes in the agenda about those two actions. We will use the konflux.ci.dev, and we need to have another ADR about detailing this. Okay.
Yeah, and the whole point of the ADR is to formalize it just to make sure that everybody knows, that we didn't just discuss it here and then nobody told anybody about it.
Cool. Thank you. That's it from me. This topic is done.
Awesome. Thank you, Francesco. Katerina, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks. So hello, for those who don't know me, I'm Katka from, I'm QE from Konflux UI team. And we started like 2 years ago with contract test. So now you can see there is a Konflux feature that was approved. I've shared a link to the doc. And yeah, as people start look at those, there are some questions regarding that. So and yes, some are like technical. I'm not having that knowledge around that, how controllers work and all around that. So mainly I discussed that with Gal. So maybe if you could sum up your concerns and thoughts, that would be nice.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for bringing it up in here. And the thing is that I don't think that there is a contract between our UI to the controllers, because they are not, the UI is not the UI or even CLI. Those are not interacting directly with controllers, right? We need to test contract between a client to a certain API. And in our case, most of the times, except for CubeSO and Tecton results, we are interacting with the Cube API. So that's the contract that should be checked. And we should rely on CRD versions to make sure that if someone makes a breaking change to the API, CRD version should be bumped, and then the UI code will need to get updated, right? I don't think that we need them to have a dedicated test for checking that contract. It just requires discipline to not break APIs, and if someone breaks an API, just update the API version and make sure that everyone are aware and there is a migration path. I think that if we need to test that a controller reconciles a resource in a certain way and then have side effects by updating same resource or other resources, this should be done at the controller repository, independent of the UI or any, independent of the UI. It's not related. Yeah, so that's my take on it. I just don't think that, to summarize it, I don't think that for eventually consistent systems like Kubernetes, contract testing is applicable. I do think it will be applicable for testing the interaction between the UI and kubectl and the detector results and any other REST-based service, and the Kube API, of course.
I would note that the incident that prompted us to prioritize the feature around contact testing was a failure between the UI and Tecton results. So that makes sense. I guess a thought I have on it is that another thought I have on it is it difficult for teams to know what parts of their API are meaningful to others and how they're used? And would formalizing contract tests help know what constitutes a breaking change and what's not a breaking change? I think about recently we had some confusion not between the UI and other teams, but between the build team and the integration team on the role of the container image field in the component spec. I guess the whole way the feature's described now is about issues between the UI and backend services. Is there any, I don't know, by formalizing that, would it be clear? Would it become more clear that that field was used by both those services, but in different ways?
One of the benefits that I see from the contract test is that the consumer, in our case UI, can specify what API calls are really important, even what fields are important, and contract test has a value to check not only the field is there, not only the field type, but also the exact field value, which, for example, may prevent issues when UI is expecting, for example, status of the pipeline to be, I don't know, succeeded, and someone just changes the string to, successful or something like that, and it will fail because it depends on the string itself, some logic in the UI, and I'm not sure if that functionality is testable in some other way or other layer of tests. Yeah, so, and then I don't know if that's still in play, but we had some calls with other architects, and there were plans like that customers can have their own UI, not just the Konflux UI that we provide. And they also can, implement the contract test for services they want to reach from the Konflux. So that would be the benefit, that they will just write a contract and they will probably pass for the first time, as it will be against existing Konflux backend. And if something, some breaking change is done on the backend, developer knows that immediately while writing the change on a local machine, because those tests run together with unit tests. So it's really fast, and it can be communicated early in the developer chain.
Can you give an example of another UI that might want to use those APIs? Do you mean like Backstage?
Yeah, I don't have example like that, but yeah, probably it can be. I know that there were some discussions that the contract test may be used not only like UI and backend, but between if customer wants to replace some of the backend services with something that they own, there also can be contract tests. We're not there so far. We are just trying to get something between the UI and the backend itself.
I would say that. Sorry, I muted myself. We need to make our CRDs. We need to define, maybe we need to better define the CRDs. So it's not like we say that a certain field can have arbitrary string value. Maybe it should be an enum. And if someone changes that enum, as I mentioned earlier, the API version of the CRD should be changed. Like I feel that any, or maybe I say it like that. I still don't see an example of how the API version of the CRD cannot protect us from misalignment between the UI and the API server.
If I could, Gal, I think the idea is maybe that if you make a change to your CRD, any change at all, do you need to bump the version every time?
Only, so I want to answer only if it is a breaking change.
And that's good. I think then contract tests help you know when the change you're making is a breaking change or not, because it gives a way for the people who depend on you to specify how they depend on you without you having to just remember.
I think that. But how do you know who depends on you? Like everyone that depends on you needs to write a contract test. I think
they have to tell you. Yeah, it's not your responsibility to go out and find out. Hack team, in this case, UI team, depends on certain APIs in certain ways. They have limited time, so they would push. Katerina, stop me if I'm telling lies. They would push contract tests to the teams that they do depend on and say, if you break this test, then I don't know, come talk to us or change your API version, or you know you're going to break us now. And similar, there's some discussions in Sidebar about dependencies between backend services. We probably have to use different technology, but the same idea could apply. That if the way that build service depends on the RPA could be expressed in a test to and submitted as a pull request to the release service team, then the release service team has an encoded way to know when they're going to break the build service.
So how this so as I see it, like the test is, tell me which fields are you using. Yeah, like you don't need, so in that case, you don't need to run a controller to reconcile the resource, right? Like you just take the CRD and then run it through a script that indicates I'm using that field, and all of those exist on the CRD. You don't really need to reconcile it. Is that
I'm not sure about that, because for example, when we test that the application was successfully created, we expect that some specific fields in that state of application have some certain values in that. And if you like run the controller, run, for example, the same methods as for the unit test, that the application is created or a component is created, then you see what really the controller changed and how it was changed. And you can then call the get from the contract test, get the current state of the CRD, and see if it fits on all the places that we depend on. So in my eyes, it is important to run the controller and to let the controller perform all actions related to some specific part that we are trying to get or patch or anything.
But the thing that I want to say is that you are not testing the controller. You need to test the CRD. You want to test that changes made to the CRD are not breaking the API. Doesn't matter what reconciles the CRD. It depends what are the values that can be added to it. That's the thing that will break the API. Mm-hmm. Not what makes the change, but what is the change that is being made.
I think I agree with Gal, but like the example Katerina gave earlier is like hard for me to process. Like in the definition of the CRD for the component, there's this point where the status gets a condition that moves to successful or succeeded. And is there adequate information in like the open API spec for that to guard and say it can only be these very specific values, and Katerina can specify I depend on it being this certain value? Or is that just like an open-ended struct?
Are there people that controller experts in here? I think you can specify exactly the structure over there, but I would need more opinions.
Could be an enum. Yeah.
Okay.
So in the case, if it would be an enum, if someone changes the enum, like adds some value, it would be considered like breaking change, right? So
Adding, no. Removing, yes. Renaming, yes. Like you need. Usually, you can understand. Like you can think about and try to estimate if you're breaking the API or not. But let's say that yes, we are humans and we are making mistakes, so we can have a contract test. And that contract will verify that certain values exist on the CRD. And if, let's say, that I'm adding a new value, it shouldn't break the test, right? Because the values that I depend on are still there. But if I would remove a value, that's something else. Like I've changed the API.
Yeah, that's like a logical argument, but this happened and it broke UI because there was just, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong with the naming, but there was like pending and succeeded like status of the resource. I guess it was pipeline, but not sure now.
Mm-hmm.
And there was actually one more status added and it was running. So it was like added between those two. And in the UI, they were just checking if the status is pending, then show this icon, and otherwise show like it succeeded. So when the pipeline started, it in the UI shows succeeded because the status was, other than pending in the UI logic. I agree that this is the mistake on the UI side, but having the contract test will like show you are breaking something on our side, and you can ping our developers and they will know, we need to fix that because there will be like more values. And contract test should prevent like other issues like that you probably don't expect to happen, but
Yeah. Or in the code, just like if you encounter a value that you don't recognize, throw an error.
Sure, coding defensively is part of it, right? Contract tests are not like the only thing here.
We need, the thing is, like I'm trying to insist here because I believe it will introduce a lot of overhead, and I want to make sure that this overhead will provide us value.
Yeah. Go ahead, Louis.
Is there room for experimentation here? Because a lot of times having a concrete example is better than just better to review and to convey the message. So maybe potential next step is to introduce one of these, and maybe it could be like a pull request, even not even merged, just to see if folks have a better, if there's an overall sentiment that it is beneficial.
In the CHI recommends there are links to SPI and HES. I've introduced those tests into 2 repos. Unfortunately, both were decommissioned. So that's why we also created this feature refinement to be sure that we don't invest those tests again to the repos that will be decommissioned. So there is something that was actually working. I also sent to the chat a link to the pact broker. So this is the visual representation of contracts. They are not active now because SPI and HES are not having those tests anymore as they are decommissioned. But you can see the contracts, you can see which versions failed, which succeeded. It's tagged by commits, so it's very, very nice. And it can be also used like as a gating for promotion to stage, for example, or to production, you know that all the components having those test screen are compatible. So yeah, if you think like it would be nice to have something like working, yeah, I don't have that right now. We can definitely start with like one component, see how it works. I'm okay with that.
Go ahead, Emil.
Yeah. So Tecton results was mentioned, and I think it's a good example because Tecton result is used by the UI. On the other hand, Tecton results is an upstream project, and the way we productize it today, and very soon it will get even more harder to test it. All those projects from upstream, they are built into a downstream product, and it comes to Konflux very late to get that feedback immediately to the developer, because those changes upstream, we can't apply those contracts. We don't control those repositories. And yeah, also the tests that we run there. So it definitely makes sense to have those tests as early as possible in the pipeline, which tests Konflux. And I think the right place for those is currently is the infra deployments repository.
I'm going to say I think we should think about the relationship between us and Tecton results we change the way I'm saying it. We should think about the relationship between teams that are like more properly a part of Konflux in a similar way to that we think about the relationship between Konflux and upstreams like Tecton results. Where if Katerina wants to specify to a team, I depend on you in this particular way, will you accept this as part of your test suite? That team should have the option to say, no, you're depending on me in the wrong way. Please change the way you're depending on me so that this is acceptable. Or it's too much overhead for me to accept this as part of my test suite. Tecton results, as like somebody who's not in the room, might say the same thing, or they might accept it. To say like, I'm a downstream consumer of your API. You could know when you're going to break my usage of your API if you accept this test suite into your test suite. It's a reasonable thing to submit. It's also reasonable for them to say no. It just depends on how the CI situation works.
Yeah, with upstream projects, specifically a bigger one with more contributors, you can't expect someone from a different company to accept your test or even accept the failure and say, I won't proceed with that change because it's breaking some of the users of that project.
Yeah.
So I don't believe it could happen. I would be glad to help with deploying those tests to the CI pipelines that we use to test the coding. As I mentioned, probably infra deployment CI is the right place for those.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. I think we didn't take notes as we go, but can I try to summarize action items? I may fail. That Katerina is going to get one example going, and we can share that with Gal to decide what we want to, if and how we want to proceed with it. Sound right? And Emil volunteered to, I guess when time comes, integrate this into the rebuild pipeline for Tecton results, the downstream pipeline for Tecton results.
Yeah, actually mentioned the infra deployment CI because even if we catch it in the CI pipelines for OpenShift pipelines, we don't have downstream dedicated CI for each component upstream. We have sort of CI for the entire product.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to separate Tecton results from the whole pipeline. As I mentioned, I think the right place for that currently is pipeline service probably, but given that there was some discussion to move that into infra deployment or that configuration, I think the infra deployment CI is the right place.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, let's wrap up this point and we can follow up async offline about it. Sound good? Good. Katerina, thank you for raising. Yeah, you're welcome. Last point on the agenda, Emil, you've got upgraded Konflux clusters.
Yeah, this is something I just encountered today. I was trying to verify that some fixes which are important to Konflux are included into the downstream builds. And it turned out that as part of the Tecton pipelines new version, the Knative version was bumped and it required a newer version of Kubernetes. So now it requires 1.18 version of Kubernetes, and what we have in Konflux is 127 something, which is part of OCP 114. So we need to upgrade those clusters to OCP 115, and the question is if there is anything preventing us, and if not, when that could happen.
Do we already have a CI job in for deployments for testing 4.15? Someone knows. I think, Emil, like what I suggested, just like create a ticket on it. Then we would need a job in infra deployment to start testing on 4.15. And after we see that this job is stable, we can upgrade. Unless someone from one of the teams will say, no, I can't. Like it's going to break me. Like I'm trusting the CI. If we are adding a job on 4.15 and it works, we trust it. We are going and start to upgrade, and of course we are starting with stage. That's cool.
Do you have any QE fork on the chart? I seem to remember that during the upgrade to 4.14, an issue was caused by some advanced testing and was resolved in time. So I would expect something similar to be in place already, or possible to do at least.
Yeah, there are upgrade jobs and there are nightly jobs for testing like the next OCP version. Just need to see that they are running, like on which versions are they running. What is it, Pavel? We already test on 4.15?
Yeah, we have a nightly test for 4.15, and we have the upgrade job that upgrades the cluster from 4.14 to 4.15 and runs some basic tests there as well.
And just to summarize the colors, it looks like it passes, but only intermittently. Which is maybe par for CI, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I will probably need to take a look at those. And this is the upgrade job. Sorry, I'm going.
Gal, the upgrade to 4.15 in terms of infrastructure work for the downstream Red Hat instances, do you want to track it at a feature level or let it just be a business as usual thing? In the past, we've had a big feature and an effort to part of that establish some of this testing automation. Do we need that same level of tracking for this prioritization?
No, no, I don't think so. Because it's just like we have an automation that does the upgrade. You just need to allow it to start upgrading to 4.15. But it is not just infra, like it is, and I think it is a question for all of the teams. Because it, as I mentioned, it would require teams to know, like we are upgrading to 4.15, make sure that in your tests, in your repo, you are using the proper Kubernetes version. Either if you are using, if you are testing on OpenShift or on directly on Kubernetes, just make sure that you also update your tests.
Okay. So maybe a ping in the developer channel to hit all teams. Ask them that. Ask for anybody to speak up if they think there's an issue, and then otherwise maybe next week we file an issue with the infra team to let that automation move forwards. Okay. The consequences, sorry, upstream Tecton has some fixes that we really need, and that's what's being blocked by this upgrade. But we can't proceed recklessly.
That ticket you asked me to open, which board should I use for it? With
Conflux.
Jira.
Conflux.
Conflux. Okay, thank you.
Cool. And who will ping the teams in Konflux developer channel?
Well, the info team will do.
Info team will do it. Thank you. Emil, I see you typing, but does that wrap up this topic for you?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. I just the most important bit for me is the awareness that we need that to actually get those fixes into Konflux and have some decisions on how to upgrade. That's our need.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That gets us to the end of the agenda. Seeing no other points, I'm going to end recording here. If I can find the button. There it is.